Great. All right. Thank you, Robert. Okay, first off, we have James Gululi. He's currently at Booz Allen Hamilton, DFARS SME to the DoD and CIO. So he lives and breathes the CMMC world. Next, we have, and thank you for joining us today, James, as a panelist.
Absolutely.
We have Joseph Lee, founder and CEO of Jlgov, and is active in technology services and consulting, and living and breathing the CMMC world as well. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you for the introduction.
And third on this panelist is our very own Dasha Deckworth, our provisional assessor, founder of this organization, and president, and CISO and resident guru of anything technical. So welcome, Dasha. Listening in is also Robert Davies, our CEO of Stealth. Thanks for joining us today, Robert. All right.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. Let's get started. We have a lot of questions today that we're going to go through. And in those, we want to cover several topics in that. Before we get started we're going to go through kind of 5 core areas of the NIST 800-171 on how to be compliant in those areas and answer questions. And reason being is because the new CMMC 2.0 that they're still finalizing, but for the most part, its framework is based off of NIST 800-171, the 110 controls. So hopefully we'll provide clarity today. Things like if I'm NIST 800-171 compliant, am I CMMC compliant, and so forth. But before we jump into those, Dasha, I wanted to bring up a topic that I think is confusing in the marketplace and see if we can bring a little clarity. If I'm a company and I'm needing to get a gap assessment and get guidance in the CMMC journey, do I use an RPO? Do I use a C3PAO, provisional assessor? There seems to be a lot of different roles that people can participate in the CMMC AB board, and then how does that fit into the marketplace?
Okay, thank you. So things have changed from about 2 years ago when CMMC came in. Initially, the idea was to have the certified assessors, which right now we only have the provisional assessors, which is the stage before you become a certified assessor, that have received the CMMC AB training. They've gone through the methodology, they know what to expect, and they have been vetted for certain criteria, expertise, longevity in the cyber field or audit field. So those are the ones that are currently the provisional assessors, and then will eventually go on to be the certified assessors. Now, considering that there was the idea about such a big bottleneck between 300,000 companies that eventually will need to get into CMMC compliance, and only 170 or 175 provisional assessors as pilot, then the idea came about, okay, well, we're going to need a couple provisional assessors supported by RPs, the registered practitioners, to help them to do the audits. Otherwise, we're going to be a bottleneck and nobody's going to be happy. So that's how RPs came about. And RPs pretty much, they are not really vetted. They are supporting the provisional and certified assessors. At least that was the idea initially. And they took an online course about what is CMMC, what is expected, and that's it. They cannot be the official assessors. They cannot be a lead. They are in the supporting function to a CMMC provisional assessor or CA or a certified assessor. However, things have changed. 2 years have passed. So if I understand correctly, the way it works now is for an audit, the expectation is that going forward, only provisional assessors or certified assessors will be able to do audits. No longer with the support of registered POs, or registered practitioners. So registered practitioners pretty much can do initially what the CMMC AB said, the consulting piece. But the problem that they're starting to see is they're not really consultants. They have not gone through the CMMC training. They don't have the same knowledge as the provisional assessor. So long story short, if I were a company, I had a choice between doing an assessment, gap assessment, or getting consulting from a RP or a provisional assessor, I would go with the provisional assessors because they have officially been trained, they have been vetted, they have gone through the background checks, they have to adhere to certain ethics, and you know that you're going to get one and the same quality of work versus an RP that just took online training. I mean, I'm being very generalizing. I'm generalizing here very much, but you know, there's a lot of very highly qualified RPs, but they decided to go that route because they just did not want to have the responsibility of being an assessor, an auditor, and the whole paper and admin work. So there's different ways, but as a general rule, I think sticking with a CA, a PA, or a company, a C-group PAO that already does these audits, will be doing these audits, is probably your best bet.
Great, thanks for that clarification. Hopefully that helped people understand that a little bit better. All right, so without further ado, let's get into 5 core steps into being NIST 800 compliant. And you know, delaying compliancy is no longer an option if the plan to do business with the DoD. So I think people are confused with the fact that because we're going between CMMC 1.0 to 2.0, oh, I can sit back and wait. No, you still have the requirements to meet of NIST 800 and DFARS. So don't wait. And you know, getting compliant to NIST 800 171 will put you in a great position for CMMC, and we can talk about that farther. Okay, so under the first core step, assess current operations for compliance with NIST 800 171 requirements 3.12.1 of the NIST 800 171. So that's kind of your first step is, you know, where are you sitting at? And one of the questions here is this something I can do myself, or do I have to hire someone to do the assessment? So I'll bring James in on that first question.
So assessments are a fun thing in my world. Yes, you can do a basic assessment yourself. Do a little homework, read the NIST documents that are out there. Now, will that assessment count towards your official assessment? Probably not, unless you want just a basic level assessment and use self-attestation. There are lots of tools and organizations out there that'll help you work through that, but if you're doing it yourself, it's pretty much going to be for educational purposes and insight into your current security practices.
With that in place, Dasha, what is all involved in an assessment of operations in relation to NIST 800 171? You're muted again.
All right, there we go.
There we go.
All right. So what is the assessment for NIST operations? Well, I mean, basically all areas under NIST are in place. So basically every single control, every single requirement you have to put in place. And so basically all of those, however many points there are in 171, need to be assessed and need to be validated. So that includes everything from passport length all the way to physical security, to training, phishing awareness. I mean, a backup, incident response plan, 24/7 monitoring, you name it.
Got it. In that light, somebody asked, if I'm a single person company, a one-man show, do I still have to comply with all 110 security requirements?
Yes.
Yes, the answer is yes.
Unfortunately. And you know, the funny thing is today, actually, and Jay, you probably you recall that earlier in the CPPAO call, we had the question of, well, what if a company is really just a one-man show and the person is 70 years old and all they do is they don't have a computer, they do it all on paper. You know, it's if they sign a contract on paper, mail it, envelope, done. They still have CUI. They still need to meet the CMMC and NIST requirements. Now, a lot of it will not be applicable because they don't have a computer, they don't have passwords, they really don't use email, none of it. But, you know, the fact is, even then, even if you do everything on paper, not electronically, and you have CUI, you do business with the government, you still have to meet the same requirements.
You know, that was really kind of you, Dasha, not to put Leighton's name in there, so. All right, sorry, Leighton, just had to tease you there a bit, buddy. All right, in section, or the second core aspect, generate a system security plan. First question around that is, what is in a security plan? You want to take that, Joe? You're still muted. There we go. Joe, you're still muted.
I think you need to.
I
as
did
the
that. I'll do
controller.
it again.
Okay.
Ask to
Yeah,
unmute.
you had to.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, you
Much
had
power. Too much power.
No problem, no problem at all. You know, it's very interesting, and I was going to piggyback off of something that Dasha was speaking about when it comes to, you know, looking at NIST 100, 800, 171, or whether or not you as a single person have to comply. It's even trickling down to the home user as well. So looking at a home user, you're still going to have to comply from what they're saying today, but you know, who knows when that's going to change at the end of it. And so, you know, as we talk about a security system security plan, and to understand that, I guess we would want to start with looking at, you know, it's really a overview of the requirements, right, that you have in place. And it actually describes the controls that you have in place, some of the planned activities that you have coming up, the responsibilities, the expectation of the individuals who will play a part of developing that, and not only that, and who will play a part of configuration all the way down to the access to a system. So you know, it's one of those type of plans that you want to check the boxes, right? What you're doing today, what you're developing today. Do I have my controls in place, and where do I score at the end of it? So when you think about creating one of those plans, it doesn't have to be, you know, a hard code, but it does need to be complete. Some people may argue against that and say differently, or we need to really have this ironed out and tooth to comb and count everything, right? Some people have even taken it down to as far as going down to all the different subnets and things that they have on their networks. So if I had to think about it, in my opinion, and what is pretty much industry standard, you pretty much have to look at a couple things when you're creating your security plan, right? The artifacts that will be documents or documentations that are collected, that are developed, the policies and the procedures of it, down to identifying the different users that it's going to be involved on the IT team, and some may even have all the way down to the HR person and even finance person. Secondly, you want to make sure that this documentation exists and is based on interviews that you've conducted with members of your company, members of the team, because again, it takes into account everything that you're doing within your organization, no matter how big or small it is. And I think the last piece that I would really say that goes into creating that is really just, you know, taking and making sure that everything is fully documented into a final product that you can always go back to, that you can always go back and update. And so when it comes time to report on that, you have an audit trail. And that audit trail will say, hey, here's my security plan, and you can attest to what you have going on in your organization. And the other part will probably lead right into your POAM for the next section. So David, I hope I've given enough information on that.
Yeah, no, That's great. And, you know, the follow-up question to that is, you know, and Dasha always likes to say, you know, we get questions when we're dealing with clients that, well, do I have to add this piece of information? Do I have to add? And her answer is always, you know, the more information is better than less information. You don't want to submit the plan and then have them have to come back and say, you know, this is not clear. You didn't give enough detail. But the follow-up question to that is, well, how
hold
often?
on. If I can say something,
Go ahead, Dasha.
From an audit perspective, give the auditor what they're asking for. Okay, as a general rule, don't give them stuff they're not asking for, and don't give them too much, because we're going to find holes. Okay, and every company has holes. So if they're asking for a network diagram, give them the network diagram. Don't give them network diagram and configuration of this and this and that, because we're going to be starting digging. So stick to what the assessors are asking. But what I would like to add to what Jay said earlier is the SSP, our system security plan. What I've noticed, what a lot of people are struggling with, a lot of companies, is what they need to put in. And there is a free template that NIST has. If you download it, it's on the NIST website, Google it, SSP, it gives you the different sections. And yes, the bottom is all the 100 some odd questions that need to be answered. However, the key and most important part, probably for you as a company and an assessor, is the top part. Is, first of all, the information about the company, the contacts, all of that. But the technical pieces, the assets that you have, what kind of systems do you have, the network diagram, how many users, how many privileged users, how many admins for those systems. And I think this is really the biggest problem, that a lot of companies really just struggle with it. And to explain it simple is, take a look at the SSP and see it as the floor plan of a building. Like, here's your living room, here's your kitchen, here's this. And the same approach here. Here's my finance system. It has QuickBooks, Windows servers, and 15 people are connecting to it. I've got one administrator, I've got one service account with privileges, and then 5 users. And then over here, I've got my research and development, and that has 15 computers, this type of network, and they're connected over here. And that's really the key, because the SSP is the very first document that an assessor will ask for, to say, show me what you got. And this is what we're going to go by. And if we don't see it, if it's not well documented, then we're going to be looking, and it's going to be painful for you as the company being assessed. We're going to be taking a lot of time of your resources, your folks, your IT staff, to ask questions, and it will be long, it will be expensive, it will be painful. So documentation is key.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks, Dasha.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Going into the what's in the SSP, I mean, NIST 801.71.13.12.4 goes into kind of the minimum of what's required in that SSP, and then it also points to NIST SP 800 Tech 18, which actually goes into a lot more detail on what is needed in an SSP. So if you fancy reading and can understand a little bit of the NIST documents, that will give you a good groundwork for kind of what the assessors should be looking for.
Yeah, I actually I was trying to find it. I know I had a copy of it, but they released a template that was geared towards CUI as well. It kind of put all the controls there for you, and it's kind of checking the box whether yes or no. Do you have these things in place? So yeah, that is a good place to start. And there is multiple templates out there.
I just pulled it off of the NIST website, and I just loaded it up. Why am I getting a disk error? Yeah.
Got a quick question, guys.
Yeah.
Now, earlier, someone mentioned or asked about they were a one-man shop, and they asked if they still had to do the 130 practice. Still, the answer was yes. But wouldn't that depend on the contract and the organization? Wouldn't they just, if they're a level 1, wouldn't they just have to do 17 practices if they're not handling CUI?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I should have preferenced from the beginning, you know, our approach right now is talking about subcontractors that have to be compliant to a level 2. out of those 3 levels of CMMC. And we're talking about the framework of NIST 800-171, the 110 controls that are going to be the foundation in CMMC 2.0.
All right, another quick question for you guys, and apologize, I'm full of questions, but when I get on these webinars, I hear a lot about CMMC, but what I am looking at, the contracts, I mean, CMMC is just a program, but the actual standards, DFARS 252, 204, 7012, 7019, 7020, 7021, don't we want people to really not get caught up on CMMC, as CMMC is just a platform, but the standard is what we should be going by?
I think Dasha wants to take that.
Dasha, go ahead.
Are you muted again, Dasha?
I mean, the thing is, of course, the contract, everything that is in DFARS is applicable. CMMC is really just there to kind of guide you, to make it a little bit easier. The framework, I mean, the real reason why CMMC came up all about is the fact that NIST 800-171 was a requirement that was put in place to be in place, but all DoD contractors, what, 6 years ago? Yeah, five, 6 years ago. But because of all these breaches that we've had and that made the news, it was realized that, well, maybe not all companies really are adhering to everything that is 171, which is what is in DFARS. And that's why the requirement came in that we have to have a third party, we have to have a framework, we have to have something different. And that's why CMMC came all about, including the fact that, hey, it needs to be, if you're at a certain level, you either need to be at level 2, audited by a third party, by somebody that has gone through the training with CMMC and knows the requirements, knows the methodology. Or if you're at level 3, you will need to go into be assessed by the DoD themselves. So yeah, I mean, the contract, everything that is in DFARS, and I don't think CMMC changes anything that is in your contract, but it gives more substance to it. It gives you more guidance. It tells specifically what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. Still keeping it loose enough for smaller and bigger companies to adjust based on their business operations. But it's honestly, not much is changing. It's really just more structure around it and asking people for more accountability.
Yeah, CMMC is the mechanism to hold people accountable to the NIST 800-171 controls.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for that question, Brian. Coming back to this system security plan, we have a couple questions. One, do I have to submit my plan to the DoD? Yes, you do have to submit it up into the SPRS system. The other question was, how often do I have to update the system security plan? James, you want to take that one?
So per 171, the only requirement is periodically. So it's not very defined very well, but with the amount of changes in technology and the amount of risks that are out there, the more frequent you review it, the more frequent you update it, the better it's going to be.
And
so, my recommendation would be at least annually, but if you can do it more than that, develop a solid plan to review it, review the threats out there, and make sure you're up to par.
And Dasha, if there's any major network changes, you automatically should be submitting it once you have a major network change, correct?
I just wanted to say, so anytime, I mean, we're talking about IT, there's always something changing. Configuration is changing, network segments, new software updates, upgrades, you name it. So yes, every time you do something, you need to update your SSP. It needs to be exactly 100% identical to what you have in the system. It's a match. So if you have a discrepancy between what is in the SSP versus what you have in your environment, you have a problem. That means you have to update the SSP. So if you have 15 projects in a year where you really are upgrading, updating everything and making changes, you're gonna have 15 changes at least minimum. And then of course, as James said, if you have you have risk management as part of NIST anyway. So you're looking at your risk, your threat landscape, what is out there, what is impacting me. And of course, those will lead to new projects. So you will then create POAM to update this, update that. And of course, that will lead back to SSP being updated as needed. And honestly, especially now, I've seen, I mean, we have one client that is updating the SSP pretty much on a weekly basis because they have a list of items that they want to upgrade, fix, change. So every single week, we sit down with them, we make those changes, SSP gets updated. Also, the NIST documentation internally, their scoring, everything gets updated and submitted whenever, especially when there's a change in score.
Thanks, Dasha. And I think that's a great lead into our, out of the 5 core areas. Number 3 is document plans of actions and milestones. For those that may have not known what a POEM is, that's what it stands for. So let's put this out there. What do I put in a POEM? Who wants to take that question? I'll throw it up there and let you guys fight for it.
I'll go ahead and give it a shot at it. But I think first, you know, maybe just as you called it out, David, people need to know what that really means and what it is. And it is your plan of actions and milestones, and that's all POAM stands for, POAM. And it basically identifies the issues that you have in your environment from the SSP, right? As I mentioned before when I was speaking, it's kind of they play off of each other. So when you have that SSP in place, or you've essentially done, and let me step back. One of the first things you should really do is to do a gap assessment, right? A gap analysis assessment, right? To identify all of these issues or potential issues that you have in your environment, your vulnerabilities, the risk, et cetera. And that will curtail your SSP. And from your SSP, you will derive putting in place a POAM. And so putting in that POAM will identify the issues and areas that you may have found. You will put a milestone, which is a timestamp of when you expect to get those things done or taken care of. It will identify the task that's even related to those issues that you need to fix. And it's really a complete schedule of all the things that you are going to be looking to fix or put in place or adjust at some point down the line. The main purpose for that POAM is to identify the risk, right? Identify the mitigation for those systems. So that's really is the purpose for a POAM and what actually goes in there. So you're identifying your hardcore risks that you found and what's going on when it comes to monitoring your environment, the corrective actions, and then the current posture of your security environment.
Great, thanks. That was great, Joseph. Dasha, this brings up a great point. Out of the 110 controls of NIST 800-171, can I put any of them into my POAM? If I don't have a firewall and I don't have, can I just put that in a POAM and say I'll fix that in 6 months from now?
You can POAM if you're
you want to fix it sooner, but yeah.
Yeah, you may have other problems if you don't have a firewall, but I mean, it is what it is. And to be honest, any company, even if you're a startup and you're going to do business with the DoD, you're going to have a starting point. And sometimes the starting point is a greenfield, which means you have absolutely nothing. So yeah, you're going to put it in there.
Great, thanks. Can I have a third party help me in creation of a POAM? James?
Absolutely. If you have the resources to bring in a consultant, I'm sure there's someone out there who will be more than grateful to come and help you do that. But NIST also provides all those templates and direction for POAMs as well. So if you're looking for the free route, check out NIST. They've got lots of resources to help you out.
Thanks, I appreciate that. You know, that brings up a good point. Understand smaller companies have budgets and need to fit, but if your business is 60, 80, 100% off the DoD, and you want to make sure you're not going to miss certification I highly suggest that you work with a third party, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And if you're not in the world of analyzing to a compliancy to the 110 controls and through your network, and you're not living and breathing those policies and processes and technology and people, sometimes it's easy to miss some of those things, and bringing in somebody that's what they do for a living, although as boring as it sounds, they live and breathe that. They live and breathe compliancy. They live and breathe those controls and those rules and assessments. So, all right. Well, this brings us into the.
I can, before you go any further, Dave. You know, when you look at it, also for small, especially for small businesses, there are also programs out there to help you with this process along the way, right? So there's organizations like the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program. And if you look at the state level, there are potential grants out there to help such organizations as small businesses that really need to get this done. And so those representatives at that local organization per your state, they have a lot of knowledge on NIST, because it's kind of the backbone and connects right to the NIST organization as well. And so they can help you prepare for some of that, those assessments and even the DFARS compliance. So just consider that too as well. I know there's the Maryland MEP. I think Virginia has a MEP too as well, or some other organization that it may be named, but that's just something to consider as well when you're looking for assistance.
No, that's a great point, Joseph. And even some of the universities have taken grant money to create programs. University of Huntsville, Alabama, has a great program in educating around this and having resources, and they put on seminars and things as well on Saturdays locally for people to attend. So appreciate that point. All right, let's look at the fourth core piece: implement the required controls. One of the first questions here is, how much of the 110 controls can I outsource? James is smiling. So, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah. A lot of this probably depends on your setup, your situation, your contract, but anything deal with on-prem security is going to be on you as a contractor. Everything else, pretty much, depending on your setup, can be outsourced.
However, the accountability is still with you. You are responsible.
Still on you, yes.
It's even you might outsource it, but you still are the one that will be CMMC or NIST certified, validated. So you're gonna have to, whatever you outsource, you're gonna have to make sure that they will provide you with the evidence and work according to those standards as well. So
if you go out to get a MSP, you need to vet them very carefully. Do they leverage FedRAMP? How do they access monitor your systems? How do they hire and support their staff?
You know, and James, that brings up a great point. You know, the difference between an MSP and an MSSP. A lot of times, if you find a good MSSP, they will have recommendations for a good MSP. And I'm going to actually bring in Robert really quick. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, how the ecosystem of MSPs out there and how we partner and work with and understanding that, you know, there's good and not so good, and how having a good partnership between an MSSP and an MSP is important for the end client.
Wow, you lob them up and I'll hit them. Okay, so the MSSP question really is one of segregation of duties. There are things that an MSP, you contract with them to provide IT services and help desk, things like that. And then just as NIST and CMMC state, you need segregation of duties around the kind of GRC aspects of I guess, logging and monitoring and checking. You can't mark your own homework basically as an MSP. So if you took as read that you do need an MSSP, if you already have an MSP, well, put it this way, you need MSSP capabilities. You could do it yourself. You could hire some folks and set up a whole team of people to do that for you. That's quite expensive and takes quite a long time to do. So this is where MSSPs come in to keep your MSP honest and also provide, be a trusted advisor and partner for you in in the murky waters of GRC and CMMC and all of the other acronyms and cybersecurity in general. So the need is definitely there. So we have experience in this space. We work with a lot of MSPs. Safe to say some are better than others. By that, I mean, you know, we without making this sound too salesy, our interest is in protecting our clients. And, you know, not all MSPs are created equal. Some are literally there to take the recurring revenue and do the minimum, whereas others actually have their clients' best interests at heart. So we have a preference for working with the latter, obviously. But, you know, as I say, we're engaged to perform our services, and in some cases it's a pleasure to work with MSPs, and in some cases, you know, we have to kind of drag them kicking and screaming to the table to get done the things that we find, the things that need to be fixed by the MSP, because we can't do those, for the client. Did that answer your question? I know I can get on my soapbox on this.
Thank you so much. So the bottom line is, as an end client, you need to create some intelligent questions to vet out these vendors and make sure that they know what they're doing and ask for references and so forth. So under implement the required controls, how do I know if I'm doing the required controls correctly? Dasha.
Well, I mean, you have to, let's put it this way. How does a construction worker know if they're constructing something the correct way? They follow the standards, they use the right material, they use people that have the right training. So if you, for example, are an accountant and trying to figure out if your firewall is configured properly or your IDS is collecting the correct logs, you might not have the knowledge for it. So it really comes back down to, you need to have the resources, the people, the know-how, and the right tools. There is a lot of information, especially around NIST, pages, tons of pages, books, PDFs, videos, all out there that explain it, what it is. It gives you, the good thing with NIST is it tells you how to do things, what needs to be done. It doesn't tell you what technology to use, how exactly to do it. So it gives you flexibility as a business. If you're a huge company and you have millions to spend, great. If you're a small business, as long as you meet those requirements, you're good. But the details, really, what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, the frequency, all of that is within NIST. Easiest way is if you are a mid-sized company or you have a internal audit, or a security team, or even if you go out and get a third-party assessor just to come in, or a virtual CISO to just guide you through it, especially if you don't have the expertise or need a second set of eyes or third set of eyes to make sure that internally you're really doing the right things. So this is all out there. I mean, there's you don't need to hire your own security staff. You can hire a part-time consultant for a couple hours or project basis that will walk you through it and explain to you and clarify things that maybe you may not know, or the team, your IT team, may not know. It is not straightforward, let's put it this way. There's a lot of interpretation, and which is a good thing because it gives you a lot of room to play with, and you're not boxed into buying Cisco firewalls, for example. But it also, the room for interpretation is that gray zone where sometimes you may just need the help from a third party.
Oh, thanks, Dasha. And you know, a good quality consultant, you know, they're passionate about what they do and they want to do good work. So they're there not just to book hours, they're there to really help you navigate and work through these issues. So the last of the 5 core pieces of the NIST 800 compliancy is maintain compliance. So first question under this topic is, how do I detect, respond, and report incidents with the required 72-hour reporting period? You know, what's the mechanics of that? What is a small business? What do they really have to do? What do they have to report in that? Who wants to take that?
I would love to take this. So the 171 3.6 goes into incident response, but the gist is you need to have a plan. You need to be able to have an incident handling capability for the organization, prep for that plan, be able to detect, analyze, contain, and recover from any incidents you might have. But on top of having that plan, you really need to test that plan. If it doesn't work when it comes time for it to actually be put in operation, it's not a great plan. So
Yeah, I mean, that's really tied into, disaster recovery, backups, all of that.
Yeah,
and how often do small businesses test their backups, right?
exactly.
Yeah,
And I
it should be
think
looked at
the
just
key,
like an incident response plan as well. It's a cycle. It's going over and over. Once you complete the cycle, you want to get right back into it again. So, if you think about it, just think about an incident response plan. For your smaller businesses, it would be the same way, right? You're not going to be able to check it every day if you're just a two-man shop. But it's just consistency, weekly basis, daily basis, checking certain things, just to keep up to par.
Dasha?
And as far as
to add,
Yeah, go ahead, Dasha.
sorry, to add to this, in order to even have a business continuity plan, incident response plan, in order to respond to anything, you need to see it first. And in order to see it, you need to have the tools, you need to have logging, you need to be able to identify this. And this is usually where the next question comes in. I'm a small business, do I need logging? Yes, because if you don't have the logs help you to visualize what's happening on your network, on your asset, if you don't have the visualization, you will not know if somebody's hacking you or if somebody breached you. In that case, if you don't see that, you cannot report it. So it starts all with visualization, get the logs. You can do it in-house. You can get a third party to do it for you, monitor endpoints, monitor network, but you have to have that visualization. You have to know what's happening on your infrastructure.
Appreciate that. And in the maintain compliance, one of the last questions here in this subject, do I have to have a plan to manage my subcontractors and suppliers to meet my compliance requirements?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a flow down clause. It's the flow down clause.
DFARS 252-7012 Section N details everything you need to do. Basically, any subcontractor working for you on that DoD contract will have to follow the same requirements that you do.
I always find it interesting with the consultants that can require literally just say line by line where it is in the documentation. That tells me they have insomnia and they do nothing but just read these things day and night.
Well, we get a lot of questions in the CIO office on subcontracts and how they interpret, and okay, my contract doesn't say I have to do this. Do I actually have to do this? Yes.
Yes.
Even if your subcontract to your prime doesn't say it, you're still obligated legally to do it.
All right. Well, let's jump into another area regards to CMMC. Dasha, I'm going to throw the first one out to you. How does NIST differ from CMMC?
Not too much at this point. There were about 20 different items between NIST and CMMC 1.2, with the 2.0 revisions that were pretty much taken out. There are still discussions about adding a couple more in there. However, right now, honestly, it's not very different. It's pretty much NIST 800, 171. The differences is, or what also got away from CMMC 2 is the whole processes, the maturity level. However, even though on CMMC 2.0 they took that out, so those were all the policies, the procedures, the plans, the 997, 8, and 9s. NIST itself still requires them. So we're still back to, I mean, they call it something different, but when it comes down to the requirements, to what you need to have in place, what you have to have in place, it's still all the same. There's minimal areas that may change going forward. There may be a couple things being added to it as new threats come about, and especially as CMMC will eventually become, 3.0 or finalized or 4.0 at some point. There will always be changes, but from the majority of the part, it is NIST 800-171. But one thing I would like to add to this is we talked a little bit about assessment and evidence and audits. How do you really know if you comply with all of this? Well, one thing that CMMC has put out there, and that is being used also, will be used going forward, is the 3 rules: is you interview, you observe, or you test. And the methodology for CMMC is going to be, or is, you have to meet 2 of those 3. So if I'm an auditor, come in and take a look at, let's say I interview you about your access control, your passwords and all that, and you tell me you're using 16 characters, all of that, you have a policy, and then I take a look at it, then I interviewed you, and I actually observed in your, let's say, domain controller, active directory, group policy that you actually have it. So those are kind of the things that you have to keep in mind when you put documentation together to see if you comply. Always keep that in mind. Interview, observe, and or test. 2 out of 3.
Thanks, Dasha. And and that brought up a substantive question here that somebody asked: if I am NIST 800-171 compliant, am I CMMC compliant?
So that's a
I'd
tricky
say you're
question.
90% there.
That's a tricky question, right?
If you're 171 compliant, you may meet the CMMC L2 standards, but you still have to be assessed.
Yeah, you still have to do the assessment.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
the assessment still needs to be done by a third party for level 2 and 3 up.
Appreciate that. Good answers. Okay, last little section. We only have about, looks like 12 minutes left. Talking about the supplier performance risk system. So they jump in this journey, they get an assessment, they start creating their security plan, they write their poems. What do they do in that system? They have to submit this stuff, right? And then they get a score. So who wants to talk about the SPRS and what the score is? How do they get a score?
So I can start. I can start off with it. It's really an authoritative source, and basically it applies to, I think it's DODI 5072 or 79.79, I think it is, and it really is just about reporting those scores based on the classifications that follows the DFARS of 213.106, I think it is. Don't quote me on that number, but I think it's .106-2. It might be. These numbers get complex. But yes, you have to report, you have to log into that system. And first you have to get your accountant access to that, right? And if you were to go to the, I think it's the WAWF.mil site, and you would click on one of the buttons there to request access to SPRS. And then once you get your account, you would log into that system, and you would just, based on your SSP and where you think you are and your score sheet, right? Your self-assessed score sheet, or whoever did your assessment, you would report those scores up there. It would take you through a series of questions, and then your scores would get updated. How can you go back and update them? Yes, you can. You can go back and do that as many times as you want. If you don't think that you cleared the bar for everything, then yes, I would say go back and do it. Do you have to have the 110 score when you first report? No, you don't. I would say try to get as close as you can. Getting to that 110 is going to be pretty hard. It's not just that simple to, put some controls in place, put some policies in place, and say that I have a 110 or a 100. So it is going to take some work to reach that level of a score. And so with that being said, the other part, it comes down to when. And some people are saying in the industry right now, well, let's just wait until we get a contract that says I have to do that. Well, the writing isn't on the wall. So some solicitations and contracts are being put out with this information in there. Do you attest, or have you attest, and have you submitted your scores? If not, you should do that before you either submit your proposal or per award. So just be mindful of that.
Appreciate that. And the next question
David,
in this area. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, it's just the answer to the previous question was, I don't think I'm not sure we covered it sufficiently. So the difference between NIST and CMMC. So CMMC is all about cybersecurity maturity, right? So my question to the panel is that level of maturity expected and mandated as part of a NIST assessment? Because CMMC are very keen on, hey, you need to have been doing this for 3 weeks, 3 months, whatever that might be. Is it the same in NIST?
So 171 as a baseline made some assumptions in the beginning that you have a company going into DoD contracting has a certain standard of cybersecurity practices in place. Then the assessments, they've got a basic, medium, and high. So your basic assessment is still all 110 controls, but you self-attest to those scores. Your medium is you're going to submit all your documents, all your paperwork, and that's going to be reviewed by an assessor, government assessor. And then your high is a government assessor is going to come on site and conduct the assessment in person. So there's a lot of variation in what you can expect to put into these assessments.
So James, is it fair to say then that maybe the CMMCAB were set up because they weren't necessarily trusting the results from kind of NIST and self-attestations and those types of things?
Exactly. Self-attestation has proven to be lacking.
Good word.
So,
I like that.
I think that's why CMMC scares so many people, is that they've been self-attesting to, hey, we're doing this, even though they're not actually sure that they're doing it, or they're just not doing it. And now they're being like, oh, I'm going to be held accountable and have to go through this process. Oh boy, what am I going to do? So, right. I mean, it goes back to if I'm 171 compliant, am I CMMC compliant? Well, right. Almost.
I just wanted to underline the point because it is important, you know. Yes, CMMC, back to David's very first point, CMMC is mandatory. You will have to have that particular colonoscopy, whereas, you know, the medical equivalent for NIST would be a kind of self-exam. So, okay, just thank you. I just wanted to make sure we were completely clear on that.
Yeah, and technically right now, until the completion of the sausage making in the CMMCAB with the DoD, and they finalize a formal accreditation, you can't get accredited right now by the CMMC because they haven't completed the 2.0 documentation. So, but that does not negate the requirements you already have and have had for years of NIST 800-171 and DFARS. If you are doing contract work with the government, you are required to do that. And so, I think Dasha everybody can readmit that the whole reason and purpose for the CMMC was the NIST 800 did not have enough teeth around it to hold the accountability of people. And sometimes people, you know, not to put blame, they just didn't have the knowledge enough. They checked boxes, but didn't really understand sometimes all the boxes they were checking and the requirements behind them to do it correctly. And that's the whole purpose of this, is to correctly orchestrate and to deliver cybersecurity controls and maturity so that you are more secure and your risk posture is less, so that we have less opportunities of foreign agencies and bad guys getting into stuff they don't need to be getting into. So
yeah, if I may, David, I know we're getting at the top of the hour here. I would like to curtail that, you know, no one asked the question of how did this all come about, or why are these type of controls being put in place and things of that nature. And I'm not sure if any of you might know. But if you look back to 2014, 2015, and some of the major hacks that happened, the OPM hack, et cetera, the Office of the OIG conducted an assessment themselves of a number of contractors. And they found that the contractors did not implement effective security control systems. And that is true to case, right? Let's face it, most businesses just do not, or they don't have the capacity, or they don't have the funding to put all of these different controls in place. So that's one of the main reasons. And when they look and did that assessment back in 2016, 2017, and they found that most of them did not use multi-factor authentication. The passwords were not strong enough. They did not periodically check their systems, their security risk systems and assessments. They did not have access control in place or user privileges. Shared accounts were found as well. And as a result of this came the inception of NIST 800-171 and CMMC Compliance at the end of it. So, we really have to look at that. And I also have the report that was released back in 2018. And just looking on my system here. So I'll upload it to the chat in just a minute here. But, that's why all of this came about. Some contractors just let it go. And we had a lot of on their side of the house. But, sometimes you just don't have what it takes to put all the things in place. But I would say today, as a nugget to all of you all, just to start now. Start putting some things in place, start putting the policy in place, start identifying where some of your gaps and risks are. It's no longer I don't need to do this right now. You need to do this. Okay. So
right.
That's my
appreciate it. Appreciate it, Joe.
It's an imperative.
Yeah. We're close to 2 minutes. Dasha, do you have some last words? You got to need to unmute. So.
Yeah, just one thing. We also had several meetings with the CMMC AB and also a lot of CPPOs and within the industry. We're all talking, and we're seeing a tendency that a lot of companies just right now, because it's all up in the air, they're just kind of sitting back and saying, we'll wait it out. We'll see what happens next. But I don't know who said it earlier, but to get really into NIST 800-171, all the policies, the procedure, the technology to really meet all that, and the 110 score, it takes some time. There's training, your people, your configurations, your business operations need to flow, change management. You need to have that pretty much mature, documented everything. So even though CMMC might not necessarily say at this point you have to show for the last 6 months you have been doing it or something like that, but you still need to be a good functional organization when it comes to those requirements. And if you wait until they drop and say, this is what the final CMMC version is, and these are the requirements, you're going to be late to the game, because then suddenly everybody's going to go for it. There's only so many assessors right now. There's only so many consultants that can really help with CMMC. So there's going to be a bottleneck. And also, once the DoD decides this is how it's going to be, then the contracts are going to be dropping. So that's when it's not going to be that time period where they said, we're going to be rolling out CMMC in 5 years. So when it drops, it drops. The contracts, you will be required to have it in place. So
thank you, Dasha. Appreciate that. James, any last words?
My two bits of advice that I always give to anyone that asks me about compliance: if you want to be 171 compliant, read NIST 171A. It has all the assessment objectives that you need to meet to be compliant. No one ever reads it. Please read it. And then if you are interested in finding out your score, please check out Project Spectrum. It's a government paid for website. I believe they've lost their funding, but the website's still up at the moment. So they've got some great tools to be able to score your CMMC 171 assessment, and they'll be able to tell you an exact score based off of your input. So,
well, thank you, James.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. I want to thank James and Joe and Dasha as our panelists today. This has been great. I think good information. Appreciate everybody that has joined us today. We do these every 3 weeks. So if you like this, please go up to our YouTube and sign up. And through Eventbrite, you can also get alerts as well when we do these. Appreciate everybody's time. I'm going to turn it over to Robert for last word. Thank you.
Hey, Robert, before you begin, I just dropped another major nugget for everyone. If you're wondering, we didn't cover it today, but it talks about CUI, Azure, and the Microsoft environment. People ask, what do I need, what I don't need, whether I need GCC or not. I just gave you all a great nugget to look at to tell you the roadmaps of where things currently stand.
Appreciate
Joe,
that.
that's
So
awesome.
everybody,
That's
please go
awesome,
click
man.
on that. So.
Well, thank you. What we will do, as we always do, we'll send an email to all the participants with the link to the video on YouTube and all of the documents and good things that folks have added to the chat. Just leaves me to say a couple of things. One, that yes, it's coming. This is coming. There will be a log jam. You know, the smart money would try to get ahead of that. And then other than that, I'd just like to thank our panelists. That was fantastic. Thanks, guys. You know, there's a whole wealth of information being shared. Hopefully that was useful to folks. Yeah, no sales pitch. That's it from us. Join us again in 3 weeks or so, and have a great rest of the day. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a nice one.
Thanks, everybody.